I need to tell you a story about the absolute psychological warfare of living in the UK. When I first packed up my life in Ohio and moved to London about 18 months ago, I thought I was fully prepared. I speak English. They speak English. How hard could it be? I expected a little bit of rain, some tea, maybe a few quirky vocabulary differences. But nobody warned me about the language. And no, I do not mean the accent. I mean the way British people use English as a highly sophisticated, incredibly polite, silent weapon of mass destruction. In the United States, if someone does not like you, or if they think your idea is completely stupid, they will usually let you know. It might be a little blunt, or you might get a very clear look, but at least you know where you stand. In Britain, they do not do that. Instead, they will look you dead in the eye, give you the sweetest, warmest smile you have ever seen in your life, and deliver a single sentence that sounds like a lovely compliment. But by the time you walk away and process what they actually said, you realize your entire self-esteem has been dismantled. You are left staring at a wall for 3 days trying to recover. Over the past year and a half, I have been keeping a literal diary of the absolute rudest, most savage British one-liners I have ever heard. These are the phrases that sound like polite, harmless pleasantries, but are actually absolute daggers. We need to talk about this because if you are an expat or if you are just planning to visit the UK, you need to understand the translation before you get absolutely destroyed in a casual conversation. Let us start with the corporate arena, because British offices are where the most lethal linguistic assassins spend their 9 to 5. Back in America, if I pitched an idea in a meeting and it was terrible, my boss would probably say, "That is not going to work. Let us move on." But during my second week at my job in London, I pitched this big marketing strategy. I was so excited, gesturing with my hands, totally American, high energy. When I finished, the senior manager paused, took a slow sip of his tea, and said, "With all due respect, Olivia, that was certainly an enthusiastic proposal." At the time, I was literally thrilled. I thought, oh my God, he respects me and he thinks I am enthusiastic. It was not until lunch when a British colleague pulled me aside and explained the devastating reality. In the UK, the phrase, "with all due respect," is not a show of respect at all. It is actually a polite way of saying you have absolutely zero respect from me, I think you are an absolute idiot, and I am about to explain why to the entire room. When they add that your proposal was enthusiastic, they do not mean you have great energy. They mean you are behaving like a loud, chaotic golden retriever who has no business being in a professional setting. I was completely shocked. The layers of passive aggression are so deep that they require a cultural decoder ring. Another classic office one-liner that I hear constantly is, "I hear what you say." In the US, if someone says, "I hear you," they are validating you. They are saying, "I understand your perspective. I empathize with where you are coming from." In a British office, if someone looks at you and says, "I hear what you say," what they actually mean is, "I disagree with you so completely that I am not even going to waste my breath arguing with you, and I am going to proceed with my original plan anyway." It is a polite door slamming directly in your face, but because it is phrased so softly, you cannot even complain about it. If you try to argue, you look like the dramatic one. They have mastered the art of shutting down conversations with absolute grace. And then you have, "Correct me if I am wrong." Now this one is a trap, and you should never ever fall for it. When an American says, "Correct me if I am wrong," they are usually showing a bit of humility. They are leaving room for the possibility that they made a mistake. But when a British person starts a sentence with, "Correct me if I am wrong," you need to run. Because they are not wrong. They know they are not wrong. They have already spent the last 45 minutes researching the topic, gathering receipts, printing out the evidence, and preparing to completely demolish your argument. They are simply inviting you to dig your own grave so they can watch you do it. It is a verbal setup designed to make you backtrack and look foolish, and it works every single time. Also, the data on this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are actually not subscribed. That means you are showing up for the passive-aggressive content, but the algorithm has absolutely no reason to show you the next video. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Now let us move out of the office and into the wild world of British social life, because the one-liners you hear at parties, pubs, or casual get-togethers are just as brutal. One of the very first social burns I received happened when I wore this bright, oversized neon green sweater to a pub in North London. I thought I looked incredibly chic and fashionable. When I walked in, a friend of a friend looked at me, smiled, and said, "You are so lucky you do not care what people think." I stood there totally clueless and said, "Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just love bright colors." It was not until I was lying in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning that the phrase echoed in my brain and the realization hit me like a physical punch. It was not a compliment about my confidence. It was a savage, polite way of saying that outfit is an absolute disaster. I would rather be locked in a dark room than be seen in public wearing that. And I cannot believe you actually left the house looking like that. In the US, we would never phrase it that way. We would just say, "Oh, that is a bright sweater." But the British approach is to frame your questionable fashion choices as a psychological trait, which makes it 10 times more devastating because it lingers in your mind forever. Along the same lines, you have the phrase, "that is a bold choice." This one-liner is the ultimate weapon of silent judgment. It can be applied to anything: your outfit, your haircut, your choice of home decor, or even the person you are dating. If a British person walks into your new apartment, looks at your accent wall, and says, "Oh, that is a bold choice," they are not praising your interior design skills. They are silently screaming inside, thinking you have absolutely atrocious taste, but they are too polite to say it directly. It is a way of expressing complete disapproval while pretending to admire your courage. It is so subtle, yet so incredibly sharp. Then there is the classic warning shot, "I am not being funny," but in the UK, this phrase is the universal green light for someone to say the most savage, insulting thing you have ever heard. When they say, "I am not being funny," they are telling the absolute truth. They are not trying to be humorous. They are about to completely dismantle your character, your lifestyle, or your decisions. It is the British equivalent of the American Southern phrase, "bless your heart," or "no offense," but the moment you hear those words leave a British person's mouth, you need to prepare yourself psychologically, because whatever comes next is going to hurt. Also, this is exactly the kind of thing I go much deeper on with the people who support this channel directly. So if you are sitting there thinking, "Okay, I need the fuller version of these British social codes and expat survival guides," join the membership below. That is where I share the deeper thoughts, the more personal side of my expat struggles, the extra bits I cannot always fit into the main videos, and some of the wildest stories from my time living here. One of the things that took me the longest to understand about British communication is the sheer power of the understatement. In America, we are very dramatic with our language. So if something is bad, we say it is a catastrophe, a nightmare, or an absolute disaster. If we are angry, we raise our voices, or we write long emotional emails. So in the UK, the angrier or more disappointed a person is, the quieter and more polite they become. This brings me to one of the most terrifying one-liners I have ever heard in a professional setting. "I was a bit disappointed." To an American ear, being a bit disappointed sounds like a minor setback, so it sounds like, "Oh, that is too bad, we will do better next time." But in British English, if a client or a manager says, "I have to say I was a bit disappointed with the outcome," you need to immediately start updating your resume. That quiet, gentle sentence is the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane. It means they are absolutely furious. They think your work was completely unacceptable, and they are currently contemplating how to erase you from the company archives. The level of emotional restraint required to deliver that sentence while feeling pure rage is genuinely terrifying. It is a masterclass in psychological warfare. Another classic understatement one-liner is, "He is a bit of a character, isn't he?" When I first moved here, my flatmate used this phrase to describe a guy we met at a local pub. I thought, "Oh, that is nice. He must be quirky, fun, and full of personality." I quickly realized that in the UK, describing someone as a character is actually a polite way of saying they are an absolute lunatic, a complete menace to society, or someone you should avoid at all costs. It is the ultimate diplomatic dodge. Instead of saying that person is completely unstable and makes everyone uncomfortable, they just smile and say, "Oh, he is a bit of a character." It allows them to warn you about someone without ever having to speak an unkind word. Then you have, "Could we look at some other options?" This is the corporate polite way of telling you that your idea is an absolute dumpster fire. In an American office, someone might say, "I do not think this is the right direction. Let us brainstorm something else." But a British colleague will look at your hard work, nod politely, and say, "That is very interesting. Could we perhaps look at some other options?" The translation of that sentence is simple. This is absolute garbage. Throw it directly in the trash and let us pretend you never pitched it. It is delivered with such a gentle, helpful tone that you almost want to thank them for rejecting you, which is the truly diabolical part of it. Now we have to talk about the casual everyday slang insults because the British have a way of calling you stupid that sounds almost affectionate but still cuts incredibly deep. The absolute king of these one-liners is "you absolute muppet." The first time someone called me a muppet, I actually laughed. I thought of Kermit the Frog or Miss Piggy. It sounded so harmless, almost cute. But when you really think about the mechanics of that insult, it is actually incredibly offensive. A muppet is a puppet with a hand up its back, doing all the thinking, talking, and moving for it. So when a British person calls you a muppet, they are not just saying you are silly, they are saying you have absolutely no brain of your own. You are completely incapable of making a rational decision, and you are just stumbling through life being controlled by external forces. It is a beautifully devastating insult wrapped in a nostalgic childhood reference. Another brilliant, colourful idiom that I hear all the time is, "he is a few sandwiches short of a picnic, isn't he?" Or, "he is not the sharpest tool in the shed." The British have an endless supply of these creative ways to call someone unintelligent. In America, we might just say, "yeah, he is not very smart." But the British prefer to create a vivid, slightly tragic picture of your intellectual capacity. Describing someone as a few sandwiches short of a picnic is just so beautifully descriptive. It implies that the structure is there, the effort was made, but the crucial elements are completely missing. It is polite, it is funny, and it is absolutely savage. Then you have the phrase, "settle down, you weapon." Calling someone a weapon in the UK was a wild experience for me. In the US, if you call someone a weapon, it usually means they are dangerous, highly skilled, or maybe even physically impressive. But in Britain, if someone calls you a weapon, it means you are an absolute idiot who is constantly causing chaos, making a fool of yourself, and being generally useless. It is often used when someone is overreacting or trying too hard to look cool. Hearing someone casually say, "settle down, you weapon," to a guy acting tough at a bar is one of the most satisfying things I have ever witnessed. It completely deflates their ego in 3 words. And of course, we cannot forget, "wind your neck in." This is one of my absolute favourite British one-liners for telling someone to mind their own business. The physical imagery of this phrase is just incredible. It conjures up the image of a turtle slowly pulling its head back into its shell because it has realised it has gone too far. It is the ultimate way to tell someone to shut up, calm down, and stay out of things that do not concern them. It is sharp. It is direct, but because it is phrased so colloquially, it carries this wonderful dry humour that makes it impossible to argue with. If you are enjoying this breakdown and finding these absolute psychological operations as fascinating as I do, please hype up this video in the comments. Show some love to your favourite confused American expat. Leave a like and tell me the most passive-aggressive thing a British person has ever said to you. Your hype keeps me going through these cold, rainy afternoons. We also need to address the passive aggression of British email correspondence because this is where the real silent warfare takes place. The absolute gold standard of email hostility in the UK is the phrase, "per my last email." To an outsider, this sounds like a helpful, neutral reference point. But in the corporate world, those 4 words are the equivalent of a verbal slap in the face. The translation is simple. I have already answered this exact question. If you had the basic decency to read the emails I sent you, you would not be wasting my time right now, so please learn how to read. It is the ultimate polite way of showing absolute contempt for someone's intelligence. Then you have the Cold War of email sign-offs. In America, we do not think too much about how we sign off our emails. We might use best, thanks, or warm regards, almost interchangeably. But in the UK, the sign-off is a highly calibrated indicator of your current social standing with that person. If someone usually signs off with "kind regards" or "best wishes," and then suddenly sends an email that ends with just "regards," you need to be very careful. That single word, "regards," is the coldest, most hostile thing you can receive in your inbox. It is a clear signal that they are deeply displeased with you and that the warmth has completely left the relationship. It is a professional threat packaged in a standard closing. Another classic email power play is "thanks in advance." On the surface, this sounds polite and appreciative, but in reality, it is a brilliant psychological maneuver. By thanking you in advance, they are completely removing your ability to say no to their request. They are saying, "I am assuming you are going to do this because I have already thanked you for it, so you do not actually have a choice in the matter." It is a polite way of asserting absolute control over your schedule, and it is incredibly effective. Living in the UK for the past 18 months has completely changed the way I listen to English. I used to take words at face value. If someone said my idea was interesting, I would smile and say thank you. If someone said I was brave, I would feel empowered. But now, my brain has been completely rewired by the British system. The moment someone says, that is an interesting perspective, my internal alarm bells start ringing, and I immediately start searching for the hidden insult. It is a survival mechanism, but the craziest part of all of this is that I have slowly started adopting these phrases myself. The other day, a friend of mine showed me a picture of this really bizarre avant-garde lamp they bought for their living room. In the past, the enthusiastic American in me would have said, "Oh wow, that is so quirky, I love it." But instead, I paused, gave a polite nod, and said, "Oh, that is a bold choice." The moment the words left my mouth, I froze. I realized I had officially crossed over. I had become the very linguistic assassin I was so terrified of when I first arrived. It is a strange feeling, but there is also a weird sort of satisfaction in it. There is an elegance to the way the British communicate. It is like a game of chess, where no one ever says checkmate out loud, but both players know exactly when the game is over. It keeps the peace, it maintains the social order, and it ensures that even the most savage disagreements are wrapped in a beautiful layer of politeness. So, if you ever find yourself in the UK and someone tells you that your idea is enthusiastic or that your outfit is brave, just take a deep breath, smile, and remember that you have just been politely destroyed by a master of the craft. All you can do is nod, take a sip of your tea, and start planning your silent, passive-aggressive revenge.